Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Sometimes the loudest warning in a marriage is not yelling. It is when love starts sounding like management. In this story, pay attention to the moment a spouse stops asking and starts setting conditions for basic warmth. That is usually the fork in the road. If affection becomes a reward for obedience, you are no longer building a life together. You are being trained inside your own home. Before we get deeper into this one, tell me in the comments right now, was this already a red flag from the start, or would you have tried to work it out? And if you enjoy intense relationship stories with real emotional twists like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. My name is Darius Bell, and by the time my marriage broke open, I had become a man who apologized before he even knew what he was apologizing for. I was 39, living in Columbus, Ohio, in a brick duplex on a quiet street lined with crooked mailboxes and maple trees that dropped helicopter seeds all over the sidewalk every spring. I taught high school band on the east side of the city, and I was the kind of man who ironed his shirts on Sunday night while jazz played low in the kitchen. My wife, Rochelle, used to say that routine made me bored. I used to call it peace. Rochelle and I had been married 8 years. She was 37, sharp-featured, immaculate, impossible to ignore. She worked in donor relations at a private university, and she carried herself like every room was a stage she had already blocked and lit. She could make small talk with trustees, pastors, city council members, and waitresses with the same polished smile. People loved her in short bursts. They called her elegant, composed, and driven. I did too at first. It took marriage for me to learn that some people do not just like control. They panic without it, and then they start calling that panic love. We met in Detroit at my cousin Nolan's Labor Day cookout, back when I was still living in Ann Arbor and driving an aging Honda with one speaker that rattled on the freeway. She was standing near the folding table, holding a paper plate with baked beans and grilled chicken, telling a story about getting stranded in a hotel conference room because a keynote speaker refused to end on time. Everybody laughed when she imitated him. I laughed too. Then she looked at me like she knew I was listening harder than everybody else. That was Rochelle's gift. She could make attention feel like intimacy. Back then, I thought her certainty would be good for me. I had always been measured, slow to decide, slow to speak, careful almost of a fault. Rochelle liked that I was steady. At least that is what she said. She told me I felt safe, which to a man raised by a church-going mother and a father who fixed everything twice sounded like the highest compliment. My mother in Flint adored her. My younger sister Tiana said Rochelle's eyes looked like she was always grading the room. I laughed that off. Love makes you arrogant that way. You assume your feelings are evidence. We built a life in stages. First, a one-bedroom apartment near German Village, with floors that creaked like old knees. Then a rental house with a tiny backyard where I tried and failed to grow tomatoes every summer. Then the duplex after I got promoted to department chair, and Rochelle moved up at work. On paper, we looked solid. We hosted Thanksgiving every other year. We took day trips to Yellow Springs. We argued over where to hang framed photographs from our honeymoon in Maine. We had a standing Friday ritual of takeout from a soul food spot near Livingston Avenue, though she always complained their greens were too salty. The trouble did not arrive like thunder. It came in little edits. Rochelle started correcting how I told stories in front of people. She would jump in and say, "What Darius means is," then reshape my point until it sounded tidier and less like me. She criticized my clothes in ways that pretended to be helpful. Not mean exactly, just constant. Different shoes. Shorter sideburns. Stop laughing so hard at other people's jokes. Sit up straighter. Do not tell your mother everything. When we left gatherings, she gave post-game analysis in the car like we were reviewing game film. I told myself she wanted us to present well. Then came my small acts of surrender, the kind you barely mark while they're happening. I stopped inviting certain friends over because she said they drained the energy in the house. I stopped going to barbershop every other Saturday and started going monthly because she thought I lingered too long there talking. I stopped playing organ at my old church on 4 Sundays because she said the drive across town cut into our weekend. Every time I yielded, I told myself I was choosing maturity, compromise, unity. That is how you can disappear without noticing. You call a harmony while your edges get sanded off. The first moment that should have shaken me happened in a diner outside Dayton during a February sleet storm. We had driven there for her cousin's baby shower and stopped for coffee on the way back. The waitress called me sweetheart when she refilled my mug, the same way Midwestern women call everybody sweetheart, honey, baby, and friend. Rochelle smiled in the booth until the waitress walked away. Then she said very softly, "You like that too much." I laughed because it sounded absurd. Rochelle did not laugh. The whole drive home, she stared out the window and answered me in single words. I apologized by bedtime. Looking back, I see the pattern clearly. She would read danger into ordinary things, then behave as if my job was to soothe her for what she imagined. A teacher texting after school about sheet music. A parent hugged me after a concert because her son finally made a regional orchestra. Me taking too long at the corner store because Mr. Benson wanted to talk Cavaliers basketball near the lottery machine. Rochelle watched everything. Not openly. She was too controlled for that. She watched with little questions, carefully placed, each one carrying a hook. Why did she text at 8:17? Why were you smiling when you answered? I learned to manage her moods the way some people manage weather. I checked the radar before leaving the house. I softened the details. Delayed sharing good news if her day had gone badly. Offered reassurance before she asked for it. I told myself all marriages had private languages, and this was ours. But my language was becoming one of prevention. I was not living. I was pre-clearing my existence. The shame of it was hard to explain because nothing looked dramatic from outside. There were no holes in walls, no screaming on the lawn, no grand betrayals. Just a slow occupation of my nervous system. The year everything split apart began with a marching band trophy and a busted furnace. January in Columbus that year was brutal. All slate sky and road salt and wind that cut through coat seams. My students won a statewide jazz competition in Cincinnati, and for the first time in years, I felt professionally alive. One of my saxophone players, a serious young girl named Milan, played her solo so beautifully the whole hall held its breath. On the drive back, I cried a little in the school van while everybody slept. Not sadness, relief, proof that something I had nurtured could still bloom without being criticized. When I got home that night, the house was cold enough to see my breath. The furnace had gone out. Rochelle was irritated before I got my key into the lock. Not scared, irritated. She stood in the hallway, wearing wool socks and one of my old college sweatshirts, and instead of asking about the competition, she said, "You left me here freezing to death." I reminded her I had been in Cincinnati with students, not at a casino. She rolled her eyes and said my tone was defensive. Then she asked whether one of the mothers had helped me unload instruments, and how long that had taken. That should have been a clue, too. Even my joy came home and had to pass inspection. Still, I stayed. Not because I was weak, though I spent months calling myself that afterward. I stayed because I understood Rochelle through a generous lens built from scraps of her childhood. Her father left when she was 9. Her mother had cycled through jobs, churches, and men with exhausting speed. Rochelle grew up in St. Louis learning that affection could vanish without warning and stability could be snatched away by somebody else's selfishness. I knew that, so every controlling behavior looked, to me, like fear in dress clothes. In March, my principal asked if I would help launch an arts partnership with a community center on the South Side. It meant 2 evenings a week for 12 weeks, teaching beginner music workshops to middle school kids. No extra glamour. Barely any extra money. But I wanted it. I believed in it instantly. The center was in an old brick building beside a church with a peeling sign and a parking lot full of potholes. Kids came in carrying instrument cases held together with duct tape. They were funny, loud, hungry, and curious. The first night, one boy tried to play the trumpet upside down and blamed the instrument Rochelle hated the program before it even started. She said it was one more thing stealing me from home. I pointed out it ended by early summer and only took 2 evenings a week. She said those were the exact evenings we usually decompressed together. I reminded her we mostly sat in separate rooms, scrolling our phones. That was a mistake. Her face changed in a second, like a door closing. She asked whether there would be other teachers there. I said yes. She asked whether any of them were women. I said of course. She asked whether I had volunteered, because one of them asked me personally. Her suspicions settled on one person fast. Janae Whitfield, the community center's program coordinator. Janae was 41, a divorced mother of one grown son, and the least flirtatious human being I had met in years. She wore sneakers with office dresses, kept a huge ring of keys at her waist, and had a habit of writing reminder notes on the back of grocery receipts. She laughed from her chest, not her throat, and she cared about the center the way some people care about living relatives. The first time Rochelle met her, at our student showcase in April, Janae spent 10 minutes praising my patience with beginners. On the drive home, Rochelle said, "She thinks highly of you." I should have answered lightly. Instead, I said, "She respects my work." Rochelle stared at the windshield and said, "Those are not always different things." I remember that sentence because it sat in the car like smoke. It made me feel accused and vaguely dirty, though I had done nothing. That was Rochelle's skill. She could place me on the defensive without naming a charge. At home, she asked how long Janae had been divorced, whether I knew, and whether I had noticed how familiar she sounded saying my name. Around that same time, intimacy in our marriage had become less like connection and more like a thermostat she adjusted depending on my compliance. If I agreed with her, canceled plans, took her side in some imagined slight, or came home in a mood she approved of, the house softened. She touched my shoulder in the kitchen, sat close on the couch, slept turned toward me. If I resisted, questioned, or simply got tired of defending harmless behavior, the warmth vanished. She became formal, distant, precise. It was never announced outright then. It was just understood. Affection was becoming a performance review. In May, my mother had a minor procedure in Flint, nothing life-threatening, but enough to send me north for a weekend. Rochelle did not want me to go. She said Tiana could handle it. She said my mother dramatized every health issue. She said gas, hotel costs, and lost rest made the trip unnecessary. I almost agreed. That still bothers me. I almost let convenience and marital pressure keep me from sitting beside my mother in a hospital room while she ate bad peach gelatin and complained about daytime television. I went because something in me flared at the last minute. I chose her. Rochelle punished me for a week. When I came back from Flint, Rochelle did not yell. She became smooth, too smooth. She asked about my mother in a tone, so even it felt rehearsed. She left my favorite mug out on the counter, but did not fill the kettle. She answered texts from me with thumbs-up emojis while I was gone, then told me I sounded guilty when I over-explained. That week she slept in a satin bonnet and on the far edge of the mattress. On Thursday, I reached for her, and she moved my hand away without looking at me. "Not tonight," she said, as if I had not earned normal tenderness. Summer came thick and humid. The neighborhood smelled like cut grass, warm asphalt, and somebody grilling sausages every Sunday afternoon. I spent more time at the community center and less time rushing home. Not because of Janae, because of the feeling I had there. Kids banging on drums, old fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Church ladies in the next room arguing over a fish fry sign-up sheet, a box fan rattling in the hallway. Life, unmanaged life. One evening, after class, Janae handed me a cherry lemon sun-drop from the vending machine and said, "You look tired in your bones." I almost cried from being seen plainly. That scared me, so I set a boundary with myself. Decision number 1. I stopped lingering after the workshops unless we were cleaning up equipment or discussing schedules. I did that because I knew how starved I was for unpressured kindness, and I did not trust what deprivation can turn simple comfort into. Janae noticed. She asked if everything was okay. I said yes, just trying to keep clear lines. She nodded once and said, "That is usually wise." No offense. No flirtation. No drama. Just respect. It hit me then how unusual it had become for someone to accept a boundary without turning it into a punishment. The real breaking point arrived on an August Tuesday during a thunderstorm. I came home drenched because my umbrella had snapped in the parking lot at school. The kitchen lights were on, but the house felt staged, too orderly, like no one had actually been cooking or living in it. Rochelle was sitting at the table with a legal pad, her reading glasses low on her nose, rain tapping the windows behind her. She looked up and said, "We need structure. Not hello. Not towel. T, sit down. Structure." Then she slid the legal pad toward me. On it was a list titled Marriage Expectations. I stood there dripping on the hardwood, reading bullet points that felt like employee policy. Home by 5:30 unless previously approved. No social contact with female colleagues outside required work. No weekend travel without mutual agreement. Password transparency. Share location on at all times. Recommitment to putting marriage before outside obligations. At the bottom, underlined twice, was one more line. Emotional and physical closeness will reflect cooperation with these boundaries. I read it 3 times. My ears started ringing. Rochelle folded her hands and said, "I am done begging for basic respect." I asked whether she understood what she had written. She said, "Perfectly." I remember every detail of that kitchen. The smell of bleach from the counters. The little ceramic fruit bowl my aunt gave us. Water dripped from my cuffs onto the floor. I asked Rochelle what physical closeness will reflect cooperation meant. She did not hesitate. "It means I will not keep giving myself to a man who refuses to prioritize me." I said that sounded like punishment. She said, "No, consequence." I said the line about approval made me feel like a child. She said maybe I needed firmer guidance because freedom had made me careless. Then she leaned back and delivered the sentence that finished our marriage. "Obey me or no intimacy." There are moments when a room does not spin or explode. It just goes still, and you hear yourself think something clean and final. Mine was this: if I stay after this, I will not respect myself again for a long time. Rochelle must have expected an argument, maybe tears, maybe bargaining. That had been our pattern. Instead, I took off my wet shoes, set them by the door, and told her calmly that she had crossed a line we could not cross. She laughed once, short and dismissive, and said I was being dramatic because I hated accountability. I told her affection was not for payroll. I had 2 choices then: sleep on the couch and revisit it in the morning, or leave while I still have clarity. Decision number 2. I left, not because I was brave in some cinematic way. I left because I know myself. One more hour in that house, and I would have started soothing her, explaining her to herself, making the ugly things sound understandable. I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my trumpet case, toiletries, and the shoebox where I kept old recital programs and my father's watch. Rochelle followed me room to room saying, "So this is all it takes?" I did not answer. That mattered. I drove to a hotel near Easton with dim lamps and a lobby that smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. I slept badly the first night, waking every hour and checking my phone like I expected to be summoned back. Rochelle texted at 12:14 a.m., then 1:03, then 5:40. First anger. Then there was confusion. Then practical items. "Are you coming to the Reynolds dinner Saturday? Did you take the good charger?" I stared at the screen and realized she was already trying to move me from human being to malfunctioning appliance. I turned the phone face down and listened to the air conditioner rattle until dawn. The next morning, I called my cousin Nolan in Detroit, the same cousin whose cookout had introduced us. He let me talk for 12 minutes without interrupting. Then he said, "Man, that was not a marriage conversation. That was a controlled conversation, wearing a wedding ring." I sat on the bed in my socks and cried so hard my chest hurt, not because it was over, because somebody named it plainly. Nolan told me to find a short-term rental and stop discussing the relationship through text. He also told me something I wrote on a receipt and kept for months. You do not negotiate with somebody who wants authority more than understanding. I found a furnished sublet in Bexley above a retired couple's garage. It had slanted ceilings, a tiny stove, and a window overlooking an alley where squirrels bullied each other over acorns every morning. It was not much, but it was quiet. I could leave a dish in the sink, and no one would turn it into a character flaw. I could come home at 7 without preparing an explanation. The first week, the silence felt unnatural. By the second, it felt medicinal. I started sleeping through the night. My blood pressure, which had been creeping up for a year, dropped at my next checkup. Rochelle, meanwhile, treated separation like a campaign. She emailed instead of texted once she realized I was not taking the bait. Her messages swung between "we both made mistakes" and "you abandoned your vows because I asked for standards." She rewrote history with astonishing confidence. Suddenly my band trips had always been selfish. Her jealousy had always been intuition. My need for autonomy has always been emotional immaturity. She asked me to meet twice. I agreed once, in a coffee shop in Grandview, because some part of me still wanted proof that she could recognize what she had done without converting it into my fault. She could not. She arrived in a cream trench coat and gold hoops, looking as polished as ever. The barista knew me by then and gave me an extra shot without asking. Rochelle opened with tears in her eyes and no apology in her mouth. She said she had been scared. She said wives should not have to beg for presents. She said I had drifted. I agreed that I had withdrawn, but I told her withdrawal and control are not the same sin. I told her the written demands, and that sentence in the kitchen changed something fundamental. She exhaled, irritated, and said, "You always focus on wording when the issue is behavior." That was when I knew counseling would not help unless she first wanted truth more than victory. She did not. She wanted me back in position, back under management. So I told her I was filing for divorce. The words made my mouth go dry, but once they were out, I felt grounded. Rochelle stared at me over her untouched latte and said, "Over one sentence?" I said no, over the architecture underneath it. Over years of fear being used as justification for control. Over affection being turned into leverage. Over me forgetting my own shape, trying to fit inside her insecurities. For once, she had no clean rebuttal. Divorce did not make me noble or instantly healed. It made me tired. We sold the duplex in late fall, and I cried in the empty living room after the realtor left because there were still pale rectangles on the wall where our pictures used to hang. Grief is rude that way. It ignores logic. I could know leaving was right and still mourn the version of us I had spent years protecting in my head. At school, I functioned. At home, I microwaved soup, watched old basketball games, and fell asleep with the lamplight on. Every few days, I almost texted Rochelle some harmless memory. I never did. Janae stayed exactly what she had always been during those months. Steady. She did not pry. She did not hover. She asked practical questions, like whether I needed the center to shift my hours on court dates. Once, after a long evening cleaning out a storage closet full of dented music stands and Christmas pageant props, she handed me half a turkey sandwich wrapped in wax paper and said, "Eat something before you turn into a cautionary tale." I laughed for the first time that week. The laugh felt rusty. Janae heard that and smiled like she respected machinery that still worked after hard use. Winter settled over the city with gray skies and dirty snow banks, shrinking at the edges of parking lots. My divorce was finalized in February, almost 6 months after I walked out. No spectacular courtroom scene. Just signatures, calculations, and a judge who looked bored by our pain. Rochelle got a larger share of the furniture because she cared about furniture more than I did. I kept my father's watch, my records, the upright piano, and the little cast-iron cornbread pan my mother had given us as a wedding gift. When I carried that pan into the Bexley apartment, it felt absurdly emotional, like rescuing a witness. I made a rule for myself after the divorce. No new relationship until I could tell the story without making myself either a victim or hero. That took work. Therapy, mainly. Saturday mornings in a modest office near Upper Arlington with a therapist named Dr. Brenda Ellis, who wore brooches shaped like birds and had a way of waiting through my polished explanations until the truer thing came out. She asked me why I had stayed so long. Not why Rochelle acted that way. Why I stayed. That question changed everything. I stayed because being needed made me feel valuable, even when the need was swallowing me. By spring, I had rebuilt routines that belonged only to me. Saturday barbershop visits returned. I played pickup ball at a rec center, where everybody complained about their knees and still foul hard. I drove to Flint to see my mother, without presenting a case to anyone. I started buying tulips from a woman at the North Market, even though I had no dining table worth decorating. Small freedoms can make a grown man emotional. One Friday after the workshop, Janae asked if I wanted to grab dinner with a few volunteers at a diner on Parsons Avenue. I almost said no from habit. Then I said yes. That diner mattered more than it should have. Fluorescent lights, cracked vinyl booths. A waitress named Loretta called everybody baby and never wrote down orders. There were 6 of us at first, eating chili and grilled cheese and arguing over whether school funding ever improved by accident. One by one, people left until it was just me and Janae over pie neither of us needed. She told me about her son in Denver and how she missed hearing his key in the door. I told her about music camps, my father's old records, and the strange loneliness of peace after chaos. She listened without editing me. I went home that night and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time because I understood something dangerous and hopeful at once. I liked her, not as refuge, not as a rebellion against Rochelle. I liked the actual woman, her unvarnished speech, her practical shoes, the way she never performed empathy. She just offered it. That realization scared me enough that I waited 3 more weeks before asking her to coffee alone. I wanted to be sure I was moving towards something, not away from a bruise. When I finally asked, she said, "Coffee is fine. Honesty is required." Our first real date was in late April at a bookstore cafe in Clintonville, while rain streaked the windows and a local folk trio tuned up in the corner for an evening set. Janae arrived 10 minutes early with a library book in her purse and a pen tucked behind one ear. She looked exactly like herself, which I appreciated more than I can explain. No theater, no curated mystery. We talked for 3 hours, not just about the divorce, about our fathers, about money habits, the church hurt, about her rule that she never dates men who describe every ex as crazy, because that usually means he is hiding himself. I told her I had almost become one of those men. That would be easy to describe Rochelle with one harsh adjective and dodge my own participation. Janae stirred cream into her coffee and said, "But you are not doing that, which is a good sign." Then she added, "For the record, I am not interested in being appreciated only because somebody else failed you. I want to be known on my own terms." That sentence settled in me. Appreciated on her own terms. I told her that was fair, and more than fair, necessary. She nodded once like a contract had just been made, without paperwork. We moved slowly. That was new for me. No dramatic declarations. No hunger confused for destiny. We walked around Schiller Park on damp evenings. We ate fish sandwiches from a corner spot with handwritten specials on neon poster boards. She came to one of my school concerts and stood in the back beside a trophy case, smiling when the trombones finally entered on time. I helped her haul folding chairs for a Juneteenth event at the center. We learned each other's habits. She hummed while searching for keys. I rubbed my thumbnail when thinking. She needed quiet in the morning. I needed directness when something was wrong. The first conflict we had was so ordinary it startled me. I canceled dinner one Thursday because my mother's car broke down outside Toledo, and I needed to drive up. I called Janae expecting at least a little irritation. Instead, she said, "Okay, let me know when your mother is safe." That was it. No hidden invoice. No icy pause. No later punishment disguised as disappointment. On the highway north, I realized my shoulders were not clenched. I nearly laughed. After years of being trained to anticipate emotional penalties, simple grace felt radical. My mother, sitting in the tow truck later, said I was smiling like I had won money. Rochelle resurfaced twice that summer, both times because control hates being forgotten. The first was a long email accusing me of parading my new relationship through mutual circles. The second was worse. She showed up at the community center before an evening student recital, dressed beautifully, carrying a store-bought pound cake like she had come to support neighborhood youth. Janae saw her first and asked quietly, "Do you want me here or gone?" That question alone nearly undid me. Choice, not pressure. I asked her to stay. Rochelle congratulated the students, then cornered me near the folding chairs and said, "So this is the woman who appreciates you?" I looked at Rochelle in that overheated multipurpose room with children running around, a deacon adjusting microphone cords, and somebody's Annie fanning herself at the program, and I felt no urge to fight, just sadness. I told her Janae had nothing to do with why I left. I left because I was disappearing. Rochelle's jaw tightened. She said Janae was enjoying the benefits of a man she had disciplined into maturity. Even then, she framed love as management. I said, "That is exactly the problem." Janae did not interrupt. She simply stood 10 feet away by the snack table, available but not controlling. The contrast said enough. Rochelle left before the recital started. Later, after the kids played and parents clapped off beat and the whole room smelled like sheet cake and coffee, I helped stack chairs in a kind of exhausted quiet. Outside, cicadas screamed from the trees. Janae handed me a bottle of water and asked whether I was all right. I said yes, then corrected myself. "No, but I will be." She leaned against a brick wall and said, "That sounded honest. I like honesty." Then she touched my arm, briefly not to claim me, just to reassure me. A small gesture landed differently when it carried no strings. By early fall, a year after that kitchen ultimatum, my life looked modest and real. I had not become a different man. I had become a more visible version of myself. I still taught band, still burned toast when distracted, still drove too fast in the rain, and kept spare reeds in every coat pocket. But I no longer lived in anticipation of somebody else's emotional weather. Janae and I had built something careful and warm. She appreciated me, yes, but not in the hollow way of praise after deprivation. She appreciated my actual self, and she expected me to appreciate hers with the same discipline. One Sunday we drove out to a small orchard past Lancaster, bought apple butter and a bag of tart green apples, and sat on the tailgate of her SUV watching families move through the rows. The air smelled like hay and cinnamon donuts. I told her I used to think love meant being chosen so completely that nothing else mattered. She said, "That sounds flattering until you realize it can become a cage." I laughed softly and said I had learned that. Then I told her the truth I had been carrying all year. "You did not save me, but being with you showed me what saving can look like." So when people reduce my story to a cheating headline or a simple tale of leaving one woman for another, I let them be wrong if they need easy categories. The real story is less flashy and more useful. My wife told me to obey or lose intimacy. I walked away, not toward another woman, but toward myself. Later, when I was steadier, I met someone who did not need me diminished to feel secure. That made all the difference. Janae did not rescue me from Rochelle. She met me after the rescue and required that I stay whole. That is what appreciation actually looks like. The part that stays with me is not the divorce paperwork or even that kitchen ultimatum. It is the contrast between two small moments. Rochelle sliding that list across the table like love needed enforcement, and Janae asking in the community center hallway, "Do you want me here or gone?" One demanded obedience. The other offered a choice. That is the lesson. Pay close attention to who needs power in order to feel close to you and who can stand beside you without shrinking you first. If this story hit you hard, drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Darius leave at the right time, or did he stay too long? Like this video, share it with someone who loves unforgettable drama stories, and subscribe for more original relationship stories with twists, lessons, and endings that stay with you. The end.